This massive drop in Bitcoin over the last year or so has been due to interest rates in order to try and curb inflation. And we're about to see some very devastating news that could see Bitcoin falling even more aggressively than we've already seen. This is not one for the faint-hearted when it comes to crypto, so let's get into today's video. Jumping across to Bloomberg, we know that over the last year or so, the US dollar has actually been skyrocketing towards the upside. And the reason for that is they've been basically pushing up interest rates in order to curb inflation. This has meant that the US currency, or the global reserve currency, becomes very, very strong as other countries pour their finances in the US dollar to try and protect them. The IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, is now eyeing a turning point for world economy as growth bottoms. The inflation fight so far hasn't really worked, which means that we are likely to see continued growth in interest rates, and ultimately that means that the US dollar will continue to see strength going forward. And if we have a strong US dollar, then anything going against it, be that Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, will struggle to compete. And we've got a big meeting coming up this week with the Fed's Wall Street clash set stage for Powell's hawkish message. So anticipating a hawkish message from the Fed, which ultimately means less excitement and more likely heavy, hard-hitting interest rates to continue into the ongoing future. So what that really means for us looking into Bitcoin, well guys, I want you to pay attention to this move followed by this one. This is the last 4 weeks worth of chart, and we can see obviously we've had a nice push towards the upside, and it might have felt like a really big happy time because of obviously what we've just endured, and we've got loads of people diving back into crypto. But what we're seeing over on the DXY could cause us a bit of concern. Now what you can see on the DXY, guys, over the last few weeks, as we've seen Bitcoin going up, we've seen the US dollar index continuing to decline. And notice what we are seeing right now in this area. Now I've drawn this area on, and we can see as we pushed up before when we came back for a retest, this gave us solid support on a weekly chart before a rally higher. As we've anticipated coming down, we were waiting for it to find support at one of these levels, never did, continued to fall, and eventually, lo and behold, we're now seeing a bounce in this area. This is a sizable bounce for the US dollar, and it's more than likely we're going to see the US dollar continuing further. It doesn't mean that the US dollar is going to continue all the way back to this level, but if you look at these other levels on the other side, this one and this one, we could be waiting for a return perhaps to here, maybe even a return up to here, which would be pretty destructive for the Bitcoin price. And if we look into Bitcoin, we can see that there's an area of resistance up here, which we haven't quite got into. Many people are calling for 25k. It still might happen, but given where the US dollar is on the DXY, you would argue that probably we won't be getting too far into this zone in the shorter term. Now, I'm not saying in the longer term we don't really stand a chance, but I am looking at what's happening in the shorter term for Bitcoin. Now on the 4-hour chart for Bitcoin, we've seen something quite interesting play out, right? We've been in this channel for quite some time, all the way back since the 21st of January. We then broke out of it and then broke down through it. Now this is always very concerning because when you have a fake out to one direction, it tends to come back to the other direction. And if you don't believe me, guys, you can see this basically happening here, where we kind of have a break towards the downside, and then lo and behold, we continued the opposite direction. And you can see in the past, this happens again here, where we push through and then break up and then down. And you basically can see what happens, guys. We get a fake out towards the other direction and then a rip back against us. And that is effectively because this area up here represents liquidity. You don't tend to just see a sort of a slow creep up, and then just carry on forever. What you do tend to see is a kind of a push one direction and then a push in the other direction in order to collect all the orders on another side of the market. Okay, so it's coming up here because they need to close out the sell orders. They push up, collect a load of buys, and everyone who's been going long here is now trapped in the market because they're not necessarily going to get a chance to get out of that trade. And you would ask yourself, well, where are the stop losses sat? And the stop losses for most people tend to be sat under here. Guys who are going long in a trade, that means they're buying the market and they're anticipating Bitcoin to go up, let's say a bit higher. They have a stop loss, which means that if it comes below a certain point, it automatically closes out the trade. But what this basically is, this is a buy, and if it hits this red line down here, it becomes a sell. Now what that means is if we've got lots and lots of people going long here, and the price eventually squeezes down here, and then they all get triggered into sells, well guys, you get a snowball rapidly down towards the other direction. And that's what happened here, guys. You can see it basically shoved very, very hard and fast down towards the downside. In this particular case, from the bottom of that pattern, it fell 21%. So if we were to break out the bottom of this pattern, well, where exactly we would go is not necessarily sure. But what we can see in the past is these areas of support that existed. Now we've got one here that is very key for Bitcoin, and that's currently sat just above $20,000. Now, if we are to see something like this play out, and we get a double bounce and a push, and we actually then put in a high above here, then that is absolutely perfect. That's the bullish signal for me that we have exited the bear market and we are in a bull market, because this would represent a higher low from this point up here and would indicate that we're in a new trend towards the upside. However, below this, there isn't a great deal of support until we get down towards this level here, at which point Bitcoin will have to fall something like 20%. Now that might not feel massive, and it isn't necessarily massive, but when you look at like Solana, Gala token, HBAR, everything that has seen a lot of hype and stuff recently, pumping up like 100, 150, maybe even 200% in terms of the gains that you're seeing there, it's down to potentially lose 50% of the value, and this could happen in just a few hours. Now, I'm not saying that that's definitely going to happen. I'm not telling you to sell right now. I obviously hold the tokens that I've just talked about, and I anticipate that if they fall further, that I'm not going to panic, and I'm not going to sell. I always talk about on this channel the importance of not reacting quickly and panicking, but the best thing we can do is actually to buy more. Now, that's probably the most worrying thing, because if it dumps to here and we panic and we sell off, and then it suddenly comes back against us, well, then we're going to feel pretty rubbish. But if it dumps to here and we are not panicking and we're calm, then we get in to buy a little bit more, and this brings down the average price that we paid. And if it dumps even further, then we just have to continue to buy the pain and suffering, and ultimately you're going to be in a good position going forward. However, you don't want to be the guys who bought the hype and excitement up here, because that's when you get wrecked. So try not to act emotionally. It's probably the best way that we can handle any of this trading. If you're like panicked and you're like, I don't know whether to buy now, I don't know whether to sell now, what do I do? Well, you need to walk away and go and do something that's kind of calming. And if you come back and it's gone up and you missed out on it, so what? There's always another day. What you can do instead is look at the market and wait for when we have a good sized pullback. This here is not a good sized pullback. I'm talking a good sized pullback of like 20%. And if we've missed that and we get another shove like this, and then we come back down to an area like this, and then we see our opportunity, well, this is where we get to buy. We don't need to buy here, and if we missed it and it comes back, then fine. At some point it's going to shove and it's going to come back to a solid position at which we can buy at. Rather than panicking and acting emotionally, try to restrain yourself. Even if it shoves from now, like 40% towards the upside, and I didn't buy, I'm not going to be annoyed at myself because I stuck to the rules. And if we stick to the rules, then we don't get burned. If you're looking to trade this move towards the downside, which I'm anticipating happening, then you can come across to Fairdesk, which is linked down below in the description, where you can go short on a position. There's obviously no guarantee that it's going to go towards the downside, so don't use money that you can't afford to lose. And if you're new to trading, then I would recommend staying away from futures trading for now, but just sticking to buying and selling your tokens. If you come through the link down below, you'll get a bonus. You can also go across to copy trading, where you can follow experienced traders in order to benefit from them when they make profitable trades. Obviously, there's risks involved. Be very cautious because past results don't represent future results, and you can potentially get burned. But again, it's about having patience and understanding that the traders who are operating there have a system and will be working over a longer period of time. So if you enjoyed that video, guys, hit the thumbs up button for me, hit subscribe, let me know down below whether you think we're about to see a sell-off happen in crypto. If not, where do you think Bitcoin's going? Hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.